Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Birth Your Business interview series, where top experts in their field share how they turn their dream business into reality and make money doing what they love. I'm Beth Weinstein. I'm a coach who helps current and aspiring entrepreneurs launch and grow their dream businesses and make money doing what they love. I'm also the founder of running apparel brand Only Atoms and come from a background helping launch and grow all types of businesses, from clothing to tech to food and more. And today I'm really excited for our guest because he is an old friend of mine and I actually know him, and I had run into him recently, I guess this summer, at a meditation event, and I looked at him and was like, why are you here? And then I heard his whole story of how he transformed his life and quit his job, and I was just really inspired and I wanted to share his story with you guys today. So today we're talking to Kay He. He's the creator of Brad Reads and Quartz's first entrepreneur in residence. Kay grew up in New York City and spent 14 years as a hedge fund analyst, with the last 8 at BlackRock, where he oversaw the New York research team in the Alternative Advisors Unit. He left his job in 2015 to explore projects focused on community, generosity, and introspection. Brad Reads emerged from the desire to answer the question, what does it mean to live a whole life? It takes an interesting approach to answering this, drawing from fields from neuroscience to sports psychology, and then shares stories to empower its community to take action. Brad Reads has expanded to include keynotes, executive coaching, and writing. Kay has spoken at Northwestern Mutual, Knight Capital, IEX, TEDx, and Yale University. And the Brad Reads weekly newsletter and community is comprised of leaders, investors, academics, and change makers. And I'm actually a part of it too, and I actually love these newsletters. So Kay, tell me, how did you go from finance to what you're doing now? I'd love to hear your whole story.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on. I'm super pumped to be doing this from San Francisco to Brooklyn. So the story was, creativity and entrepreneurship is messy, and the outside world loves to see a very kind of clear narrative and arc, but really isn't that. It couldn't be further from the truth. So I left finance almost 2 years ago, and I actually thought that I was going to start a venture capital fund or a fintech company. It's like I had blinders on, and it's like, oh, you like finance, you like tech, open them slightly wider. And what I realized though is, like, I gave myself some space to kind of explore myself, and really what came out of it was I didn't know myself. Like, for 35 years on paper, as kind of a link, my LinkedIn resume was great. But when I really, really reflected on my life, I was nothing but a scared little boy. And all of the things that I had been doing, the like promotions and working my ass off and CrossFit and everything, was around like trying to mask that deeper unsettledness, I guess. And that's where coaching came in. I was just very lucky to find an amazing coach who really kind of, I think it was the most basic question. She's like, why are you always in a rush? Because everything in my life was rushed. And I was like, well, I got to do this, and I want to read this book, and like, there's so many great things in life. And then I kind of just blurted out, and we're all going to die, so we better get moving. And I was like, she's like, whoa, like, you just went there real quick. Yes, we are all going to die. But it doesn't mean that you need to crush audiobooks. Like, that's not going to paper over that. That's not going to solve that existential crisis. And so that from there, I kind of just started sharing what I was going through. And I think because I came from finance, because despite being almost 38 years old, I have the kind of curiosity and techiness of a millennial, and just like sheer willpower, just kind of putting myself out there, and people really resonated with the story. And so Brad Reads kind of evolved from that. I never set out and said like, oh, I'm going to create an email newsletter, and oh, I'm going to, do some coaching or keynotes and all that. So.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love your story, because I knew Kay back when he was in a rush in finance. And actually, I remember he said to me, I think it was something like this, that you didn't go one night without dreaming about work or something similar, or like your friends all dreamt about work constantly. And, you know, it's a very common thing in New York. We're all go-getters, and it's, especially in finance or money-making jobs, it's all about like, what's next? But I'm curious, when you made this transition, even without realizing, and let's say when you started working with the coach, did you ever run into that major fear of like, what the F am I doing? I just quit this lucrative job. Like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And how'd you get through that?
Yeah, again, it's like valleys and peaks all the time. I still get it. I think, you know, it's so at the basic level, there is this concept of sunk cost fallacy, where I had dedicated my entire life to get to that point, and I was just abandoning it. But that's like it's a known behavioral bias, and it's just the wrong way. Like you shouldn't think that way in investing. Like you should honor where you came from, but it doesn't mean that just because you took a certain path, you have to anchor to everything that happened. So that was one element. The second element was when people on Wall Street they claim to be risk takers, but they're actually some of the most risk averse people you've ever met. And I think the biggest example that I can give was when I left BlackRock, the number one question that all my peers asked me was, what are you going to do about health insurance? And these are people who had, I don't know, 7-figure savings, 8 figures sometimes. And it's like, I'm going to pay for it. It's really expensive. But if anything, health insurance is one of the most simple things, because you have, until your COBRA runs out, you have 18 months of the exact same coverage. It's just really expensive. And so there's this like disconnect of like, A, like cutting into your savings, B, the uncertainty of things like that are considered staples like health insurance. And then the last part was the biggest thing is you just kind of have to stop caring what other people think, because people mean well, and everyone has advice. And you have to honor the advice, but at the same time, a lot of advice, including the advice that I give people, which I'm very hesitant to actually give people advice, is by nature an extension of my worldview, my insecurities and all that. And so I had to really, especially in finance where it's so easy, it's like, oh, that guy was a managing director, or that guy worked at this fund. It's like, boom, that's your identity. And then when you step into this world, then you are writing blog posts that are literally being read by 5 people. You're like, okay, I guess they don't matter to anyone. And having kind of that emotional resilience kind of plow through it was one of the major things. But I get it all the time. Yesterday, I was at a dinner with people who hadn't seen me for a while, and it was the flip side. They're like, oh my God, things are going so well for you. Like, that's incredible. And in my mind, I'm like, they're not really, like, it seems like it may be, but I still don't know where my next paycheck's coming from. So it cuts both ways, you know, where people like over congratulate you. And so it's just like, you know, it's kind of like the only thing you can control is what's happening in your own mind, and kind of stay true to that. You know, what people tell you, you know, whether it's like really great or really terrible, it's just like, you only, you know.
Yeah, I find it interesting because, I mean, that happens to me. I've seen it happen to other entrepreneurs where everyone just sees one thing and they assume that everything's going great, or they assume that everything's going bad, whatever it is. And, you know, you mentioned that we do all wear these masks. I mean, that's, you know, it's like the ego, the human ego. How does one get through, like you said, like quit caring what people say, or, you know, follow yourself? It's true, especially when you go to launch a business or change careers, you hear everybody's opinions. You know, there's family, there's friends. I mean, someone actually called me delusional like literally a good friend called me delusional, and I was like, wow, really? But how does someone how do you suggest that people get through this, like breaking it down?
I would say a few things. One, I'll go through, like with my coaching hat, is using a mantra. So I have a mantra that my coach shared with me, is whenever I compare myself to someone else, I just say compare to spare. And it just kind of like shuts things very quickly. So that's a very kind of quick, hackish thing. The second is that there's just so much actual literature. I'm still a very like research oriented person coming from my investment nature. There's so much research out there that whether it's like a lottery winner is less happy 1 year after winning the lottery, or that the marginal happiness that a dollar brings you declines after you make $85,000. Like obviously you have to adjust that for New York City and San Francisco.
Yeah.
But even if it was double, it's so much lower. Or there's like research studies of people who are externally motivated versus internally motivated are more likely to binge on alcohol and like get divorced and things like that. So there's just facts. And then the other element of it is that mankind has been writing about this struggle since the beginning of the written word, whether it's the Taoists or the Stoics. And so learning from others that have tried to deal with this, right? For me, there's this passage from the Tao Te Ching where it says, I'll never forget this passage. It says, fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will dull. Chase after money and chase after money and security, and your heart will never unclench. Care about other people's approval, and you'll always be their prisoner. And I heard that, and I was like, this was written 2,500 years ago. Like that basically summarized my adult life in 8 sentences. And so, just regrounding yourself and finding that you're not alone in it, right? It's a very natural human thing. And then the last thing is, this is, I think, the most pragmatic thing, that is to write down what success means to you personally. I mean, success is a very personal decision. And so for me, like I write that down, and it's like being around people that give me positive energy and where they're open to my energy, being creative every day and doing different things, having a way to personally connect with people, being the father and husband that I want to be, like wearing like cool sneakers to work, every day, and so having that list. And then when you look, like I have that list, and I looked around and I saw like an old analyst of mine that got like a Land Rover. I'm like, what the hell? Like that person used to work for me. It's like, why don't I have that? And then I kind of walked through that list in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't even like cars. I don't even drive. And so, but you have that natural instinct. And so it's kind of like giving yourself these different tools to calm yourself. It's like how baby soothes.
Self-soothing. Yeah. I love what you said about compare to spare, because comparison I found is one of the worst things for, yourself. And it's purely ego driven, and it really doesn't get you anywhere except miserable. And especially these days with social media, and they're all connected, and we all see the mask that everybody's posting, like, oh, everything's great, but then we don't actually know. So I remind others of that all the time.
Yeah.
And I love some of the tools you just said, the mantras and that passage from the Tao. What do you find, because I know you work with others and you have your community, what do you find people do struggle with the most when they're like absolutely miserable at their job, or they're drinking alcohol to cope with their lives every night, or whatever it is? So what is the number one issue? Or three?
Okay, I'll give you the short answer and the deeper answer. The number one issue, I think, is that the childhood wonder that you're born with, where, you know, Soraya, my daughter, is 3, and literally it's like, why is the sky blue? Why is a tree? What is anger? What is happiness? What is blue? And that curiosity at some point in our lives starts to harden, and then I think it just disappears, and you start to believe the story. You become, I guess, like emotionally complacent, and you start to believe the stories. It's like, oh, people with more money are happier. It's just easier to believe that, because writing out what success means to you and reminding yourself about that, it just like takes a lot of work. And so I think that the biggest struggle that people have is that they stop questioning, and they just assume that because things are the current way, like that's why they must be. You know, like an investment banker assumes that he or she must respond to emails within 3 seconds of receiving. Like, and at some point that hardens into a worldview that everyone has to be like that. And then I tell people, I check my email 3 times a day. And like, you can't do that. I'm like, why not? And so it's kind of like disentangling from that story. The deeper question that I've realized a lot, especially with type A overachieving, mostly males, but it's females as well, is that because we're so secular, people are terrified of mortality. And so what that means, there's a great book that like really influenced me called The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, which like won the Pulitzer in 1973. It's so like super old. But basically he makes an argument that mankind is so terrified of their own mortality that to fight that fear, you feel like you need to live a heroic life. And so you need to build a great company. You need to build a family legacy, write the great American novel, start the next Facebook, have pyramids built after you, whatever. And the reality is that, and so everyone has convinced themselves of this need to live a heroic life, even like solving a world disease. And I think that reconciling, like when I told myself, now I see in certain of my behaviors, like that action you're doing is from your desire to live a heroic life. And it actually, just ask yourself why you actually want to do that thing. Is it because you truly believe in the essence of that thing? Like for me, it's like writing a book at the moment, or is that the way you're projecting to kind of create that sense of permanence for you? And I think that's I have this conversation with people and they just don't want to, they want to stop having that conversation. It's very unsettling. And it's something that I had refused to acknowledge my whole adult life. And when I finally did, I was like, oh, okay, like, the other example I use is CrossFit. I mean, I would go in there and just like bang so hard and try to beat, like, because it's all a competition, 21-year-old, you know, men who were way more fit than me just by sheer virtue of age differential. And in my mind, I'd created this bizarre story that if I could beat a 21-year-old in a CrossFit workout, then I must be closer in age to 21 than to 37, which is just ridiculous. Yeah. It's just not true. But I did that for 4 years without like actively realizing why I was doing that. And so now I still do CrossFit, but I do it because I like enjoy the actual exercise of it, not because I'm trying to stamp my place in kind of the realms of like physical immortality.
Yeah. I mean, I think you brought up some good points there. And I think this also has to do with this, this kind of illusion of like always wanting more, always going after more, and the illusion of like, what's going to make you happy. And then some people like me and maybe like you and others that are listening got to that breaking point where you're like, wait a second, the more money, the more this, the better job, whatever it is not actually creating inner happiness. So, because I know for me, it was a combination of things: changing a job, taking up meditation, questioning my life, coming to that, like, is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? What other tools, because I know, meditation also has had an impact on your life, but when people are uncomfortable taking a look at this notion of, how am I going to create my legend on this planet before I die, or whatever, this internal struggle is, what helps someone get through this and see the light of, reality, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing is that I've been repeating this sentence where, which is, there is no there. Like, you don't get there, and all you have is now, right? And I don't believe I don't believe that, like, it means you should go, like, sit under a tree for 20 hours. But maybe you actually should. But the tools, I think there's a few tools. One is coaching. I mean, I think that coaching still has a stigma of, like, someone that needs help. But I'm just so bewildered by this. Like, we have yoga coaches, nutrition coaches, private school kindergarten admission coaches. Like, why would you not use a coach for your career, for your mental well-being, for your marriage? This is one that I've really been thinking a lot about, is why does marriage therapy have such a negative stigma? I think it's probably because we're, like, researching therapists right now. I think it's the most important coach you should have, like, by a mile. Like, you have no business having a yoga coach before you have a marriage coach. Exactly. It just doesn't make sense. But the stigma of these things, and again, stigmas go back to, like, not caring or detaching from what people think. So I think that's one approach that has really helped. Unfortunately, coaching is expensive, and so there are prohibitive elements to it. The other tool, I would say, is really creating that space for yourself, right? It just takes time. And again, I keep going back to physical fitness, where, I don't know, you probably run an hour a day or something, or do some kind of exercise for that amount of time. And it's pretty much a non-negotiable. I mean, I know you, like, it's a non-negotiable in your life. And so I think that there's this element, and I think it's different for each person, of, like, emotional, spiritual fitness, that you just have to prioritize it the same way you prioritize physical fitness. And guess what? That takes time. And that means you have to cut something else out, whether it's, like, social media or drinking or TV or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have done, reading Donald Trump articles. There's a lot of things that we can actually cut out. And I think the last part is just, like, adding an element of mindfulness to all your decisions. And I say that in a very specific way. So I was on this podcast. It was, like, a very much more like an alpha podcast called Invest Like the Best. It was a great podcast. And we're just, like, really getting into it in finance and life, and just, like, and then we start talking about different tools. And one is, I asked him, when was the last time you noticed just one of your breaths? And we just both, like, took a deep breath, and the air in the room just, like just what, and we both were like, whoa, like, you could hear it in the episode. You're like, whoa, everything just reset. And that was just one breath, literally one breath of air. And I think people underestimate that. And I talk about kind of stillness, which is a catch-all for meditation and a bunch of other things. I'm not one of those guys that thinks that, like, meditation is the silver bullet that will make all your problems go away. Far from it. But I think there's a continuum where it's like, notice 5 breaths a day. Actually, you put me onto the book, Positive Intelligence.
Yeah.
where it's like you're flexing you do like curls for your soul, or like noticing your toes, you know. And then on the other end, you have like the Yuval Harari, like 60-day silent retreat, like Vipassana retreats. And then there's like everything in the middle. And so I think everyone's got to kind of find their own space that works with their schedule, that works with their priorities, that works with their teachers.
Yeah, you said something that was, I actually say this to so many people that are like, I don't have time for that. You know, because physical fitness for me is really, it's so important that it is a non-negotiable. And I know that if anything, it gives me more time to invest the time on the front side. But I tell people meditation, even 10 minutes, like brushing your teeth, you know, like you don't really go a day without brushing your teeth. And it's become such an important part of my life. And honestly, almost every single entrepreneur I know, every single person I interview does some sort of a mindfulness practice. And and it is just taking that time for stillness, whatever it is, you know. And I agree with you, it doesn't have to be the way I do it, you know, 20 minutes, push in silence. Everybody has their way, but I used to think that running was meditation, and I used to use that as my excuse. And now I see, kind of like what you said about CrossFit, it was actually the opposite. It was like a way to just like prove this, go more, go faster, go longer, you know, do more. And it was just the opposite, do. So I love what you're teaching. Now, we're almost out of time, so I want to tell people more about Rad Reads. Like, what is it and what's it becoming? And
no, thank you. So Rad Reads is, I say it's a community of change makers, leaders, and like lifetime explorers. And pragmatically, it started as an email newsletter, a lot of link blogging, where I would curate 5 interesting stories. And it's evolved from that to my own original writing. It has a kind of social video component to it, where I think I've done probably 150 daily like mini vlogs on Snapchat. And so it's, you know, it's not a huge audience, but it's just kind of like a daily reflection on something. There's events. We have a San Francisco, I guess, chapter where we're having an event tonight. And I think it's just this belief that other people can see the beauty. I can see the beauty in you that you can't see in yourself. And so when you bring those people, that type of group together, and create the space to do that, I think it all helps us kind of unlock like joy, compassion. And so that's kind of what it's evolved into. I'm trying to write a book about these ideas. I go and give talks to companies about this. And it's really special because, you know, it's surprising that people will let you in and to talk about fear and ego, right? I think it kind of, at first you're like, whoa, where are you going with this? But then it's just so human. If you go back to the Tao Te Ching and all that, and it's like, yes, like we need a space to have this conversation. And so Rad Reads is an extension of that space. It embraces technology to bring us closer together. It embraces storytelling. And at the end of the day, it's just like, the reason why it's called Rad is because it's just like, let's not take this all so seriously too. Like, let's not lose the playfulness and wonder of life. And so that's what it's become.
It's awesome. When I found out you were doing this, first of all, I was shocked because I only knew the old K. And I actually love the newsletter. I've gone to the meetups. There's some really interesting people, and I agree, community is so important, especially being in like a more conscious or mindful community of like-minded folks, because then it's a new level of connection. And I think it's important for, regardless of what kind of business or entrepreneurs, but for anybody to connect with, next level people that are, have the same types of goals. And it's more than just like getting wasted and making money and going on vacations or whatever it is,
Absolutely.
So, I love it. I can't wait for your book. And everybody, there's going to be a link in the email. So click on the email. There'll be a free gift. And you can also subscribe to the Rad Reads newsletter and find out about the happy hours, which are right now in a couple places in the country, but probably expanding, I'm sure.
Hopefully, touch wood.
Yeah. So anyways, thank you so much, Kay. I really appreciate it. You have so much knowledge to share. And I'm sure our listeners have really enjoyed this. And I hope people can see that there is a little more to life than just having a job that makes you money, because you'll eventually, my theory is everybody will get to that breaking point in some way, or they'll end up on their deathbed wishing they had done something different. So stay tuned tomorrow, where we have another expert who shares their stories on how they change their business and how they do work that they love. And thank you again for being with us. And I can't wait to see what's next.
Cool. Thank you. I'm excited. And then thanks for doing this beautiful work and bringing it to all these amazing people.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye.